at this time, I'd like to invite Delia Roberts. We're going to have her come on, and she's going to give us a little bit of insight in some of the other aspects. So I'm going to turn the stage over to Delia. Welcome, Delia.
Super, thanks so much. And I really want to thank everyone at the Balanced Sport Medicine group for inviting me to come and share this information with you. So while my work really has been focused on worksite injury prevention, it really is very applicable to anybody who wants to spend time on snow. And because the research was done with people who spend a lot of time on snow, I think it is quite applicable. So the work initially was conducted with ski patrols, instructors, and lift operators because they're the groups at the ski resorts that have the highest rate of injury. But I have also conducted the same types of work with all kinds of other industries, including physicians. So you'll see that I did make sure that Mark had breakfast before he fixed my knees. Anyhow, the point here is that this type of work addresses both the types of prevention strategies that Mark and Lynn are talking about, and you'll see them coming a little bit later. But one of the aspects of it is to look at fuel supply. And in this case, what we're trying to do is delay fatigue. So we're going to give the muscles the energy that they need. But we're also going to try and supply our nervous system with fuel, because it's the nervous system in terms of your brain that is helping you assess risk and make good decisions. And it's the nerves that are connected to your muscles that are going to help your joints and recruit the right muscle at the right time to stabilize the joint and support those fairly fragile ligaments that we really don't want to damage. So if we look at our first question here for the poll, if I could have the first slide, which breakfast would you choose for a day of skiing or riding on the hill? So our choices are nothing because you're not hungry, maybe just some coffee, your nice greasy breakfast with sausage, bacon, and eggs if you believe in sort of the paleo ketone approach. Oh, maybe it's that cinnamon bun that just smells so good when you walk into the lodge. And maybe you're on a bit of a budget, so you choose oatmeal with some nuts and dried fruit and a little bit of milk or yogurt. Okay, so let's look at the next slide and we'll have the answer. All right, so what we're going to look for is a breakfast that combines both carbohydrates, proteins, and a little bit of fat. And our problem is that when we start our day after an overnight fast, our blood sugar is at its absolute lowest. That's problematic because our nervous system, both our brain and those all-important nerves that are carrying information out to the muscles, receiving information from the joint about tension and pressure, well, they rely on glucose as their primary fuel. It is possible for them to adapt to ketones, but in every single performance study that's ever shown an advantage from a ketone diet, they actually supplement with carbohydrate during the activity task, during the exercise task. What we do know is that when you eat something that tastes sweet, so it has the simple sugars, they're already released from the carbohydrate structure or from any of fiber that surrounds them. So they are absorbed very, very quickly. And when blood sugar rises very quickly, we release the hormone insulin. So we have a problem there because blood sugar spikes upward, and then about 2 hours later, it tanks out. The research that I've done shows that we can measure a change in reaction time when that happens. And it's actually those cycles of highs and lows that are problematic. So I had a little handheld reaction time device, and it looked at simple reaction time. In other words, how quickly can you react to an unexpected stimulus? But it also looks at how good your choice or your response is. So we're looking for accuracy there in terms of your decision making. You don't want to have too much fat in your diet. So while you might think that that really greasy breakfast is going to last you all day, the problem is that it takes pretty much all day to digest. So fats don't mix with water. And when the concentration of the meal that you eat is higher than about 30% fat, it actually really delays digestion because all of that has to be emulsified before it can move through your digestive tract. So really, what we want to try and do is combine complex carbohydrates, so foods that are relatively unprocessed that have a lot of fiber in them, with a little bit of fat so it lasts a long time, and then of course a bit of protein because the protein also will last you a little bit longer. So that way we can smooth out those spikes in blood sugar and delay the insulin response. And the data that I have from about 15 different ski resorts shows that the injuries, both in employees and guests, really cluster at the 2 points of time in the day where you expect that kind of spike and then the trough afterwards. So by simply changing up the diet a little bit, there's about a 40% reduction in injury rates. It's pretty significant. Okay, the next slide. Now I know that people aren't going to like this question, and it is kind of sad because obviously spending a day at the ski hill afterwards, we often like to share a bit of brew with our friends and talk about our skiing day. So, is beer a good recovery drink? And if we go to the next slide, we'll get the answer. So the problem that we have with anything that contains alcohol is that it's actually going to act directly on the kidneys to prevent our ability to reabsorb water, and that leads to dehydration. And dehydration has also been shown, there's quite a bit of literature in the sports world that shows that even a pretty mild dehydration will impair both physical performance as well as cognitive performance. So the same kinds of things that we saw with those shifts in blood sugar, we also see when people are dehydrated. One of the things that I see often when I'm out there at the hill is that people don't like to drink water during the day. Part of that is they don't like to carry a water bottle, but also, if you drink water, well, then you're going to have to pee, and, they don't want to stop and go in and use the washroom. So that's a bit of a problem because that dehydration is really going to allow you to better enjoy your day. It can alleviate the fatigue and certainly in terms of your ability to react when, let's say, your ski hits something that you didn't see, maybe a ball of ice, or it goes into a deeper bit of powder. So the way to get around that is to sip your water instead of chugging it. And there are these nice water bottles that you can buy these days that are soft and they fit into your pocket really nicely. I really like the hydration systems where you have a hose with a bite valve. But in the wintertime, it's problematic because they tend to freeze up. So you can now actually get ski jackets that have a proper sleeve in them to protect them so they don't freeze up. But what happens is that when you drink more than about half a cup at a time, the water moves into your bloodstream very quickly, but those tubes are very, very thin. So the bolus of water is kind of like that chunk of water circulates around, and it takes it a while to really mix in with your blood. And as it passes around the receptor that tells how concentrated your blood is, it kind of fools it into thinking that it's excess water and you pee it out. Also, when the water passes across your throat, it shuts off the thirst reflex. So thirst is not really a very accurate indicator of whether you're dehydrated or not. So what I really recommend to people is get yourself one of those nice small water bottles and just take a sip every time you're on the chair, just a mouthful or two, and that will keep you hydrated and keep the fluid inside of your body. The last piece that's worth talking about is the carbohydrate content of the beer, because it is important to consume some carbohydrate at the end of your ski day, especially if you've had a really, day where you've really gone for it and you've really, your legs are feeling very tired, because there's a limited amount of carbohydrate that's stored in your muscle. And that's the carbohydrate that actually fuels your legs while you're skiing. But we can kind of trick our bodies into recovering much faster if we have a high carbohydrate snack immediately following exercise. And the type of exercise that we experience while we're skiing, and I'm not sure, maybe a little bit later Lynn will talk about this, but when the muscle lengthens under load, as it does when you're resisting gravity, it actually can cause little tiny tears in the muscle structure. So having some protein afterwards will really help with rebuilding. So a recommendation then is to have a nice carbohydrate snack, and the recommendation there is not quite a gram of carbohydrate for every kilogram, but for most people, this is going to be a 200 to 300 calorie carbohydrate snack with a bit of protein thrown in. And it doesn't have to be exact, but what's really important is to get it in that first hour after the end of exercise so that your body absorbs it, sucks it up, and puts it right into the muscle. Okay. The last comment I will make is for those of us who are aging, and I did take a brief look through the photos of the participants, but for those of us with gray hair, getting that protein is extra important, because there is quite a bit of evidence that for older people to maintain their muscle, we really want to make sure that we get that good quality protein. Okay. So I think that's my last slide, and I can't advance to have a peek to make sure, but I think that was everything that I wanted to tell you about tonight. There's lots more to it, and but I think staying fueled up is a great way to keep yourself sharp, prevent the fatigue in your muscles, and help your nervous system really support you while you have a great day at the hill.
Thank you so much, Delia. And as with the theme of tonight, knee injury and injury is multifactorial. And you've given us some real insight into, boy, what we put into our bodies for fuel and how many beers we have at the end of the day is relevant. When I think of the ski industry, how the breakfasts are almost always lined up with eggs, sausage, bacon, and high-fat breakfasts. That's a takeaway message for me. Some of those things do affect your performance, and I'm positive we're going to have some questions. Now, are there any questions right now that you've got there, Juliet? So we're going to wait till the question part comes on, but I might just ask you one. What if you do have 3 or 4 beers and you do have a little too much and you got to work the next day, you're on the hill the next day? What would be your advice to me? Late night, I've realized, okay, I had a bunch of beer. What do I do to perform better the next day?
Yeah. So thanks for asking that question, because that is the reality, is that for sure people will overindulge. And so there are a few tricks that you can use. The first one was to try and combat that dehydrating effect of the alcohol. And so I actually include this in my program as an actual strategy. But we recommend that people try to have, for every serving of alcohol that they have, that they also drink a glass of water. And then at night, before they go to bed, that they use a sport drink or a rehydration fluid. And the reason behind that is that the little bit of salt and sugar that are contained in those sport drinks really help keep the fluid inside your body. So on one hand, you have the alcohol telling your kidneys to offload the water. Having a bit of salt can really help keep that fluid inside your body. And then we also recommend that people try to eat a little bit while they're drinking, because one of the things that happens as you process the alcohol to get rid of it, you also consume a lot of the carbohydrate that's in your liver. And we want to make sure that you have that blood sugar nice and stable. So again, having a little bit of a snack before they go to bed, and then same thing again in the morning to make sure that they have a rehydration drink on the way into work, and that they really focus, or on the way up to the ski hill, and that they really focus on trying to make sure that throughout the day they're consuming probably a sport drink, and then really making good choices in terms of keeping their blood sugar stable through the day.
Yeah. So I've got one more question for you, Delia. I go for a ski tour and do a big day, and I'm starting to get some cramping at the end of the day, and I get back to the car. Can you give me some example of that, the glycogen and protein snacks? Like I'm not savvy to know what I should be eating. What should I eat as I'm driving back from K Country or Rogers Pass? And just in that first hour and a half, I really like that tip, but I'd like a little more insight.
So the ski touring situation is probably a little bit different than for most people at the hill, because the energy output is quite a bit higher. So I just caution people, if you're thinking about a day of downhill skiing, you might want to just balance out the amounts of food that you're consuming. So I think the first suggestion I would make is to snack. And I know there are some schools of thought that say, well, you shouldn't snack in between meals because it's extra calories and so on. But when your body is consuming that energy, your muscles are contracting and they're working hard, you really want to try and keep it topped up. So you want to try and prevent the glycogen or the carbohydrate in your muscle from bottoming out in the first place. And so pocket snacks, things that are high protein, that aren't messy to eat, right? That you can keep in your pocket and eat quite quickly. Things, if you are a meat eater, like beef jerky, and hopefully without too many nitrites in it. Nuts are always a favorite pocket snack, but the problem is that they're quite high in fat. So what I suggest to people is that you choose a cereal that's a little bit high in fiber and lower in sugar. And so things like Shreddies or Cheerios that don't have as much sugar in them, and they are a whole grain cereal, maybe a few pretzels and a little bit of dried fruit, mix those in with your nuts so that you're diluting out the fat a little bit. There's also sort of a rule of thumb that you can use when you're selecting a power bar or an energy bar of some type. And on the label, you can look and see how many calories there are for fat. So that should not make up more than a third of the total calories. So you can look at it for digestibility. And the sugar content doesn't matter so much in that exercise situation, because while your muscle is actually contracting, it's going to prevent your pancreas from releasing insulin. So the sugar will just go straight into your muscle. And in the post-exercise period, the sugar is great because the insulin is actually going to help your muscle take the carbohydrate up. And the sugar is even a little bit anabolic. So it almost acts a little bit like testosterone, the insulin does, to stimulate muscle rebuilding. And there's, I didn't put it on a slide, which I probably should have, but there is a Facebook page called Fit for Snow. And on that Facebook page, I put all kinds of tips like this, but also recipes for homemade power bars or homemade power muffins that have sort of the right balance of carbohydrate and protein, a little bit less expensive, maybe have not so many preservatives in them. So those are also good choices. And you can always just save half a sandwich. If you're eating it in the car on the way home, that's also a really good choice. Some fruit with a little piece of cheese, any combination there of carbohydrate with a little bit of protein.
those are awesome tips. I'm going to add some shreddies to my nuts because I just love nuts too on the trail.